which planetary lines should you live on and which should you avoid? A lot of people think that you should avoid Pluto lines, Saturn lines, Uranus lines, Mars lines. And the reason being is like Mars is aggression. Pluto is like volume up. It can be like extremely nerve-wracking and transformative, but in a nerve-wracking way. Uranus can shake things up unexpectedly. And Saturn, of course, we all know Saturn can make things hard. These are, I want to say, like the tropes, like the normal tropes. However, it's really important to look to your chart. For example, let's say your Saturn is conjunct with your Venus in your 10th house, like mine. So when Saturn is conjunct Venus in your 10th house, which is what I have, Venus is beauty, lovely things, right? It kind of like puts a softness on things, right? In your 10th house, my 10th house of public image and career. Great, beautiful. But the other dark side of Venus is not caring so much, maybe being a little lackadaisical. Not lazy, I don't like to use that word, but like, just kind of like go with the flow, just kind of like, very Venusian. With Saturn there, conjunct my Venus and my MC, which is career, in my 10th house of public image and career, it puts this sort of emphasis on putting in the time and putting in the work, right? So that Saturn being conjunct with Venus in my chart actually forces me, or I don't know, force is the wrong word, but it levels it out, right? In my life, I tend to put in the work. I tend to put in the time that is required to become good at something, to, develop the skills needed. And I take it seriously. Saturn's very serious. It takes it seriously. So I don't necessarily believe that living on a Saturn line is bad. I've never lived on a Saturn line. I do have it pretty predominantly in my chart in my 10th house of public image and career, which is a pretty important house. It's a 10 house, which is an angular house. The 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th houses are the angular houses. They're very action oriented. So it's really important to look to your chart. That's how it's going to impact you. For the last 6 years, I've been living on a Jupiter local space line. I'm smiling because last night I jokingly said to my partner, I go, I've been living on Jupiter because there's a lot of reasons I said that, but one of the reasons is because I'm making this Astro documentary series called Your Natal Promise, and the next one that I'm going to be working on is Jupiter, the Jupiter line I've been on for the past 6 years. Jupiter is in my 5th house, which happens to be ruled by Capricorn, which is also ruled by Saturn. And 5th house is hobbies, romance, dating. So since I've been here, there's been a real emphasis on the things that I do for fun. And so there's been a lot of emphasis on music and poetry. And now I'm transitioning into, I'm still playing music, but doing more filmmaking, right? So there's a lot of emphasis on that Jupiter influence here. So, it's important to see where these planets are in your chart. A lot of people would just kind of blindly move to a Jupiter line. And I don't think that's how it works. People think like, oh, Jupiter's the luck and abundance. But Jupiter turns up the volume on anything. So if there's anything negative happening, it can turn up the volume on that too. And the other thing with Jupiter also is, for me, it's in my 5th house in Capricorn. So Jupiter's in its fall in Capricorn, which is not great. Capricorn ruled by Saturn brings a serious tone. So it's true. There's a serious tone to my hobbies. They're supposed to be fun. The fifth house is supposed to be fun, but mine's ruled by Capricorn. And so there's a little bit more seriousness to my hobbies. So don't just think that, oh, I shouldn't move to my Pluto line. The other thing I will say is I live on a Pluto. I live in between two Pluto lines, Pluto Mars and Pluto Moon. So Mars and Pluto, you would think, oh gosh, that sounds terrible. But Mars is also conjunct my Venus. So Venus is softening things. It's in between my Saturn and my Mars. So it's creating this sort of like buffer between Saturn and Mars. Saturn, the seriousness, Mars, this like action-oriented warrior energy, go for it, impetuous, impatient. And Venus sits in the middle of those, which I think is creating some more balance that people that otherwise going to live on their Mars line wouldn't experience. Again, really important to see where those planets are. The benefics are Venus and Jupiter. The malefics are Mars and Saturn. And then, of course, Pluto, Uranus, Neptune. Those are outer planets that aren't necessarily as supportive as like Venus. And people always say that Jupiter and Venus are these great benefics, but like they've both got their dark sides too. So don't just blindly go to a Venus line. Do travel around and see how you feel in different places. I lived on a Venus line for 2 years and it was okay. It wasn't, I didn't totally love it. I didn't feel like I had a ton of community there. It was really cold also. So New York City is right directly on my Venus MC line. A lot of good things happened there. I got a book deal. I was really able to build my business at that time. I did a lot of social media. My YouTube channel at the time got really big, and this was in the 2014 to 2016. So it was a while ago. But I think that it's different for everyone. I've found that living on my sun line is a lot more fruitful and exciting than living on my Venus line. And everybody just assumes Venus, Jupiter, those are the good places. That's where you want to be. But that's not always the case. So you also have to look to see whether you have a day chart or a night chart. And that's really easy to do. Just if the sun falls above the midline, it's a day chart. And if it falls below, it's a night chart. And then if it's a night chart, then Venus is the benefic. And if it's a day chart, Jupiter is the benefic. So there's a few different things to consider here. Just kind of learning and looking and seeing where things fall in your chart. And you can get a reading for sure. It can help to get a reading by someone who's been doing this for a while. But you can go on astroseek.com, pull up your chart, pull up the aspects, and read all of the interpretations. It'll do it for you. And then make your own conclusions. You can draw your own conclusions because you've been living your life. You're the expert on your life.